Are you even listening, sweetheart? Or do I need to write it down with crayons for you? Hubert's voice carried across the restaurant, dripping with disdain, and his table of wealthy companions erupted into laughter. Elena, balancing her notepad and tray with practiced calm, forced her lips into a polite smile. She had heard every type of insult in her years waiting tables, but tonight something about his tone cut deeper. Maybe it was the way the billionaire leaned back in his velvet chair, one hand swirling his wine glass, as if this was all a stage performance for his audience. Or maybe it was how the others at his table, men in pressed suits and women in glittering dresses, leaned forward eagerly, like children waiting for their leader to perform another cruel trick. Hubert tapped the menu with the blunt end of his fork. Let's see. I'll take the steak. Medium rare. No, forget that. Sea base. Unless, of course, the chef has something better in mind. I like surprises. His grin spread wider, and he added, though I'm not sure our waitress here can keep track of all that. More laughter followed, this time sharper, almost rehearsed. Elena scribbled down the notes, her handwriting neat despite the tremor of embarrassment in her hand. She wanted to tell him she could remember a dozen orders at once, that she had put herself through community college with these very hands, that her memory was sharper than most of the people sitting at his table. But words like that only ever came back to wound servers. So she nodded, tucked the notepad against her apron, and said quietly, I'll make sure the chef knows exactly what you'd like, sir. Sir, Hubert repeated mockingly, dragging out the word until it no longer sounded like respect. Did you hear that? She thinks I'm some stiff businessman. Elena, was it? Relax, sweetheart. I'm your friendly neighborhood billionaire. Just do your best, He winked, then lifted his glass in a mock toast that had his guests chuckling once more. Her name. He remembered her name, though she hadn't offered it tonight. He had heard it before, probably pulled from the murmurs of staff around him. The deliberate way he used it now felt like a weapon. As Elena stepped away, her cheeks burned hot. She focused on breathing evenly, her shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. The restaurant glowed with warm light, jazz spilling gently from hidden speakers, but to her it felt suffocating, like every chandelier was a spotlight shining down on her humiliation. At the kitchen doors, another waiter brushed past and muttered, Tough table. Hang in there. She forced a smile of gratitude, though her chest ached. She had handled difficult guests before, bridezillas, drunk businessmen, rowdy tourists. But this was different. This was deliberate cruelty. When she returned with bread and wine refills, Hubert's eyes tracked her every move. He made a show of shifting his chair, stretching his long legs across the space where servers passed. Elena noticed, but kept her tray steady. She had walked around plenty of careless guests before. What she didn't expect was the sudden, intentional jerk of his foot. Her toe caught on his polished shoe, and the tray in her hands lurched forward. Glasses clattered, one toppled, and before she could correct herself, the heavy decanter slid off the tray, smashing against the marble floor. Red wine spread like blood across the pristine white tablecloth. The restaurant fell into a sharp, icy silence. Then came Hubert's laugh. Loud, exaggerated, filling the void. Well, look at that. Our little ballerina doesn't know her left foot from her right. Give her a hand, folks. His companions clapped and hooted, some pounding their fists on the table as if they were at a comedy show. Elena bent quickly, gathering the pieces of broken glass, though her palms stung from tiny cuts. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears, and humiliation pressed on her like a weight. Careful, darling, Hubert called down, voice booming. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. Unless, of course, you need me to call someone to tie your shoelaces for you. A ripple of laughter swept across the restaurant now, not just from his table, but from others nearby, who couldn't resist watching the spectacle of a billionaire mocking a waitress. Elena's hands shook as she set the shards on the tray. She whispered an apology, her throat tight. I'm sorry, sir. That won't happen again. Oh, don't apologize, Hubert said grandly, raising his arms as though delivering a line on stage. Mistakes are part of the charm, aren't they? We should all forgive our little entertainers. After all, this place wouldn't be the same without someone giving us a laugh. The room chuckled, but quieter now, uneasy at his cruelty. Elena stood, tray against her chest, willing herself not to cry. She could take the ridicule if it meant keeping her job, but a fire had started to burn inside her chest. When she returned to clear the table for their next course, Hubert leaned in, his eyes glittering with amusement. "Tell me, sweetheart, do you practice tripping at home? Or is it just natural talent?" The words snapped something in her. She straightened, met his gaze, and for the first time that night, didn't smile. "Actually, sir, I managed just fine until you decided to stick your foot out." The air at the table shifted. His guests froze, their laughter caught mid-breath. No one expected her to answer back. Hubert's smirk faltered. Then he barked a laugh, though this time it lacked warmth. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the quiver in her hands. "I took your order 3 different times because you couldn't decide what you wanted. And then you tripped me in front of the whole room." Gasps rustled around the table. One of the women set down her glass a little too hard, and a man at the far end cleared his throat nervously. Hubert's face darkened. "You're accusing me? In front of my friends? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Elena swallowed hard. She knew this was dangerous, but she couldn't let him keep treating her like she was nothing. "I'm talking to a man who thinks humiliating people is entertainment." The silence around the table was deafening. For the first time that night, the guests didn't laugh. At that moment, the restaurant owner appeared, drawn by the tension. He was a small man with thinning hair, his face pale as he glanced between Hubert and Elena. "Is there a problem here?" Hubert leaned back in his chair, regaining his composure, and pointed lazily at Elena. "This one just accused me of tripping her. Can you imagine? She's ruining our evening. I don't pay good money to be insulted by staff." The owner's face drained of color. He turned to Elena, voice low but urgent. "Apologize." "Now." "I already did," Elena said, her voice trembling. "But I won't lie about what happened." Hubert slammed his glass onto the table. "Fire her. Right now? Or I'll make sure this place doesn't last the month." The owner's eyes darted, panic rising. "Mr. Hubert, please." "I said fire her." Hubert roared, and the sound echoed across the dining hall. The owner turned to Elena, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry. You're dismissed." Effective immediately, her chest tightened, the words sinking like knives. "You're firing me because I told the truth?" The owner glanced at Hubert, then back at her. "You need to go? Now." Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Some guests looked away, embarrassed, while others stared openly, hungry for more drama. Elena stood frozen for a moment, humiliation rooting her to the spot. Then, with shaking hands, she set the tray down, removed the small apron tied around her waist, and placed it gently on the empty chair beside her. Hubert leaned back, victorious, sipping his wine with a smug smile. "That's better. Maybe next time, sweetheart, you'll learn some manners." Elena turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap, cool against the hot tears welling in her eyes. She made it to the side of the building before her strength broke. Leaning against the brick wall, she covered her face with her hands and let the sobs come. She didn't hear Daniel approach until his voice broke through the quiet. "Elena." She lifted her head, startled. He stood there in his crisp shirt, tie loosened from a long day at the office, his expression carved with worry. He reached for her hand, and when he saw the cut on her palm, his jaw tightened. "What happened?" Her voice cracked as she told him everything. Hubert's games, the trip, the laughter, the firing. By the time she finished, her tears had dried, replaced with a hollow ache. Daniel listened silently, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I already know about Hubert. I've been looking into his company for weeks. The fraud, the bribes, the offshore accounts. He thinks he's untouchable." Elena blinked, confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Daniel said firmly, "we don't have to let him win. Not this time. Not with you." She stared at him, the words taking time to sink in. "But I'm just a waitress. What can I?" Daniel cut her off gently, his eyes holding hers. "You're not just anything, Elena. You saw him, you experienced it, and you're brave enough to speak the truth when everyone else is afraid. That makes you exactly the person who can help bring him down." Elena's lips parted, her heart thudding. For the first time that night, the fire in her chest flickered into something else, hope. But her voice was still uncertain when she whispered, "And if we try, Daniel, what happens to us?" Elena's fingers twisted in the hem of her faded uniform, the cheap polyester still carrying the faint smell of garlic and wine from hours of service. She sat on the couch that sagged under their weight, the single lamp in their small apartment throwing more shadow than light across her face. Her eyes were red, puffy from crying, but behind them burned something new, fear laced with defiance. Daniel moved closer, gently taking her hand. His touch was steady, his jaw tight. He wasn't just her boyfriend tonight. He was the man who'd spent years studying the law while juggling night shifts and endless debt. A man who hated bullies with every fiber of his being. Elena, he said firmly, they don't get to crush you just because he's rich. Hubert Calloway thinks money makes him untouchable. But you know what makes us dangerous? She looked at him, her lips trembling. What? The truth, Daniel replied, his voice low but sharp. And the fact that I know exactly how men like him operate. They think laws are for the poor. They cut corners, they bribe inspectors, they hide everything behind paperwork no one ever dares to look at. But I will look. We'll drag his empire into the light if we have to. Elena swallowed, her heart beating faster. Daniel, he didn't just humiliate me. He enjoyed it. He made me rewrite his order 10 times, like I was some kind of joke. He stuck his foot out and laughed when I fell. He made the whole room laugh. And then, when I tried to defend myself, the owner didn't even hesitate. He fired me right there, in front of everyone, because Hubert told him to. Her voice cracked on the last words, but Daniel squeezed her hand tighter. Exactly. That's not just cruelty. That's abuse of power. And if he's so reckless in public, imagine what he's hiding in private. Elena hesitated. The thought scared her, but it also sparked something dangerous, hope. You think we can prove it? Daniel leaned back, his eyes narrowing with resolve. I don't just think it. I know it. Because I've already heard whispers about him. Deals that smelled dirty. Factories that mysteriously burned down when regulators came sniffing. Workers whose complaints never reached court because suddenly their lawyers backed out. He's built an empire on silence. But he made a mistake the second he made this personal with you. Her breath hitched. So what do we do? Daniel stood, pacing the cramped living room like a soldier drawing his battle plan. First, we document everything from tonight. What he did to you. How he ordered you around, mocked you, tripped you, laughed when you fell. How the owner took his side without question. That humiliation wasn't an accident, Elena. It was harassment, calculated, public, and malicious. Then, I dig deeper. His companies, his contracts, every loophole he's been slipping through. Men like him always leave a trail. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, listening. For the first time since being fired, she didn't feel powerless. She felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. Still, her doubt whispered back. And if we try, what happens to us? Daniel stopped pacing, leaned down, and cupped her face in his hands. His eyes softened, though his voice stayed ironclad. Then we fight together. No matter how high he sits, no matter how much money he throws, he's just a man. And the law, if we use it right, is stronger than any one man. Silence filled the room for a moment, heavy but not hopeless. Outside, the city lights flickered like restless stars through the window blinds. Finally, Elena exhaled. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Daniel. Let's do it. And just like that, the trembling in her chest began to fade. For the first time since she walked out of the restaurant, Elena wasn't the one crumbling. She had someone standing beside her, and a plan that might just change everything. Daniel kissed her forehead softly, then crossed to the small desk wedged against their apartment wall. He opened his battered old laptop, its screen cracked at the corner. We start tonight, he said. Elena blinked. Now? But it's now, he repeated, voice calm but burning with resolve. Because this is when men like Hubert Calloway believe no one's watching. But I'm watching. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of keystrokes, whispered questions, and muttered curses. Elena hovered nearby, sometimes dozing on the couch, sometimes waking to refill Daniel's coffee. Each time she stirred, he gave her the same reassurance. We're getting closer. At dawn, Daniel finally leaned back, his face pale with exhaustion but alight with grim triumph. He turned the laptop toward her. Rows of spreadsheets filled the screen, along with scanned documents, wire transfers, and names she had never heard before. What is this? She whispered. The skeletons, Daniel said. His voice carried both satisfaction and fury. Hubert's entire empire is built on shell companies and offshore accounts. He uses restaurants like yours as laundering channels. That's why your manager turned on you so fast. He wasn't protecting Hubert's pride. He was protecting his own dirty lifeline. Elena's stomach turned. So my humiliation was just a performance? Daniel nodded. A warning. Hubert wanted everyone to see what happens when you challenge him. No one questions him, Elena. That's how men like him survive. For the first time since that night, Elena didn't feel small. She felt angry. So what do we do with this? We build the case, Daniel said firmly. Not rushed. Not reckless. If we show our hand too early, his lawyers will bury us. But if we corner him the right way, his jaw tightened. Even he won't escape. The weeks that followed were a blur of strategy. Daniel worked long nights, reaching out to reporters, regulators, even ex-employees silenced by non-disclosure agreements. Some hung up on him. Some laughed. But a few, just enough, listened. Elena, meanwhile, began to shed her old fear. She printed files, organized timelines, tracked Hubert's public appearances. Each small act stitched her sense of self back together. She was no longer the trembling waitress with spilled champagne on her apron. She was part of something larger, an effort to bring a tyrant to his knees. And then came the night. The same grand hotel. The same glittering chandeliers. The same powerful faces. But Elena wasn't in uniform this time. She wore a modest navy dress Daniel had found at a second-hand shop, her hair tied neatly back. To the world, she was just another anonymous guest. But inside, she knew different. The ballroom thrummed with chatter, champagne glasses clinking, cameras flashing. At the center of it all stood Hubert Calloway, broad-shouldered, booming with laughter, orbiting in a halo of money and power. Elena's throat tightened at the sight of him. Memories clawed their way back. The jeers, the cameras, the laughter at her expense. Daniel touched her hand. Breathe, he whispered. She nodded. This time, I'm not alone. The confrontation began with a question. A journalist, young, sharp-eyed, braver than most, raised his voice above the chatter. Mr. Calloway, there are rumors your overseas factories aren't as clean as you claim. Do you care to comment? The room hushed. Heads turned. Cameras angled forward. Hubert chuckled, smooth as ever. He raised his glass. Rumors are the hobby of people with too much time and too little money. My empire speaks for itself. The crowd tittered approvingly. But Hubert wasn't finished. His gaze swept across the room until it landed on Elena at the back. And besides, he added, lips curling into a smirk, since when do the opinions of waitresses and failed lawyers matter? Laughter erupted, louder this time, pointed. The sting hit Elena's chest like ice. For a heartbeat, she felt that old humiliation returning. The same laughter, the same spotlight, the same helplessness. But before the weight could crush her, Daniel stepped forward. His voice cut through the laughter, steady and unshaken. Then perhaps you'll let the evidence speak, Mr. Calloway. Gasps rippled. All eyes turned. Daniel stood tall, a thick folder in his hands. The cameras swiveled, hungry. Hubert's smile faltered, if only for a second. Daniel's tone sharpened. Bank transfers. Offshore accounts. Payments to inspectors who signed off on unsafe factories. And sworn statements from the very employees you believed too small to be heard. He lifted a page high. Your empire doesn't speak for itself, Mr. Calloway. We're here to speak for it. The silence was electric. Journalists surged forward, their pens scratching, cameras flashing furiously. Hubert barked a laugh, too loud, too forced. This is ridiculous. Unverified slander, pulled from the internet. Nobody here takes you seriously. Then explain this. Daniel's hand moved swiftly. He clicked a remote, and the ballroom's massive projection screen, meant for showcasing Hubert's investments, lit up with rows of numbers and signatures. Wire transfers. Names. Accounts linked directly to Hubert's companies. The crowd gasped as the truth unfolded in black and white. Hubert's face drained of color. Turn that off, he snapped at the technicians. Now. But the young journalist shouted first. Keep it on. Others joined. Phones were raised, recording, streaming. The more Hubert shouted, the smaller he seemed. Elena felt her breath catch as she stepped forward too, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. You thought humiliating me would keep everyone silent. But tonight, the only one exposed is you. The words hung heavy in the room. No one laughed this time. Within minutes, the ballroom descended into chaos, reporters firing questions, security scrambling. Investors backing away from the man they had once worshipped. Hubert tried to shout over them, but his booming voice was drowned beneath the tidal wave of evidence, cameras, and whispers of fraud, corruption. Finished. Elena and Daniel stood side by side at the edge of the storm, their hands linked. For the first time since that terrible night, Elena felt tall. Not because she was standing on any stage, not because she was dressed in silk or jewels, but because she had faced the man who tried to shatter her, and she hadn't bowed. Hubert Calloway, the man who once silenced rooms with laughter at others' expense, now stood cornered, his empire cracking before the very audience he sought to impress. And Elena? She no longer trembled. And so, the billionaire who thought he could humiliate a simple waitress with his money and power ended up humiliated himself in front of the entire court. Elena, the woman they fired for talking back, walked out not broken, but stronger than ever. Sometimes, the ones they try to silence are the very ones who expose the truth. Thank you for watching this story. Tell me, if you were in Elena's place, would you have had the courage to speak back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong. Would you like me to also create a set of show? This is Elena Rivera's story, a woman mocked in front of the powerful, only to reveal the strength and grace that no one could take from her. Thank you for listening to this story with us. If it moved you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Wherever you're listening from, we're grateful you're here. Until the next story, take care.